welcome back to a new episode of Franklin Covey's twice weekly podcast on leadership with Scott Miller. That's me. I'm your host each week. Goodness, 6 years, nearly 400 episodes where Franklin Covey has continued to invest and sponsor this podcast where twice weekly on Tuesdays and Fridays, they still, can you believe it, still invite me to host this podcast where we interview luminaries from all walks of life, CEOs, famous celebrities, Olympians, athletes, academics, researchers, authors, business titans, entrepreneurs, people that are household names with major celebrity, and some who are not, but perhaps have done something cool or interesting or survived something traumatic or horrifying, but all have the commonality of the courage and the abundance to come onto this program and invest in you as our viewers and listeners to teach you to be a better leader, how to become more effective. Our co-founder, Dr. Stephen R. Covey, who of course wrote the seminal book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, dedicated his entire 80 years with us, investing in people to become more effective, to understand what motivates you and what is your passion and your mission and what are your introspections, your self-awareness areas to build upon to make you more influential as a friend, as a family member, as a solopreneur, as a leader, as an individual producer. This podcast is designed to invest in you. And today we have a hilariously funny and shockingly self-aware guest. Her name is Tara Schuster. She wrote a series of books that you have recognized the names by me repeating them: By Yourself, The Effing Lilies, and today's topic, Glow in the Effing Dark. She is here to talk about all things real and practical. Her book is in fact titled Glow in the Effing Dark, Simple Practices to Heal Your Soul, from someone who learned the hard way. Welcome to On Leadership.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Tara, you have done something that a lot of people want to do. You've made a bit of a career switch. And so what I'd like to do is open today's podcast with you, talk about kind of who was your former professional self and who is your current now professional self. And maybe you could use that as an opportunity to walk through your history as a business professional and now a best-selling and renowned author. And then maybe you could follow that up with, how did you do it? What was the courage? What were the insecurities? What were some of the things you struggled with that might give voice to others that are thinking about a similarly courageous pivot?
Yeah, this is a great question. And so thank you for asking it. So I did not set out to be a self-help author, to be in self-care, none of this at all. I was firmly corporate. So I was vice president of talent and development at Comedy Central, where I started as an intern on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart's back. I'm so happy about that. I started there right after college, summer after college, and I ended as VP. I think I was there a total of 12 years. So unlike all my friends, I was loyal. I just stayed at the same company. But I had gone to college for writing, and I had always wanted to be a writer. I was too afraid to become a writer because I thought writers were poor. Generally, I thought artists were lazy, poor, crazy, all pejoratives, and that I could never make it because when I was graduating college, Lena Dunham had just done Girls. And I was like, ugh, she already has a TV show. If I don't have a TV show by 25, like, what am I even doing here? I give up. So I gave up. Totally gave up. But I'm going to work close to what I love. It's comedy, right? I love writing comedy. Both my books are comedic. I'll let you be the judge of that, but I hope that they're comedic for you. But I gave up and I kept working up this corporate ladder. So basically what I did was find, identify, develop ideas and talent. So different comedians to get them on the air. And then I would manage the whole show. So if you saw Key and Peele, for example, sketch comedy show, I ended up as the executive in charge of that show. And that means you give notes on the scripts, which, like, oh my God, how was I qualified to do that? And yet I did it. You oversee the budget, all of those kinds of things. But the whole time, I say I gave up, I still had a dream. So I was submitting articles to the slush pile of the New Yorker. And to my total delight and surprise, a couple things got in. That gave me some confidence. So I pitched a book to publishers, got the book deal, and then I'm making a very long story very short because I don't want to bore anybody. But the key that I was going to get to was I did it every morning before work. I would write. So I'd wake up, I'd write for at least an hour, then I'd work out, then I'd go to work. I did that for 3 years until the book was done. So what I kind of learned was my dream job was totally possible. All the corporate things that I learned have been unbelievably helpful as an author. I mean, most authors don't understand marketing, budgets, all this kind of stuff that really helps you build an apparatus and get your name out there. All of those things really, really helped. But I never quit my job. I never threw caution to the wind. Adam Grant is one of I don't think he would say that I'm one of his mentees. I don't know what he would say. He's definitely guided me through a lot of things. But his books have guided me through a lot of things. And he has a book called Originals. And in it, he talks about how when you have safety in one domain, you can take risks in another. So I had safety in my corporate job, able to aggressively save, learn things, have a work identity. That allowed me to take the risk to become a writer, because by the time I shifted, it wasn't really that risky. So I tried to answer, did that sort of give the answer?
No, it's superb. This is not a book review podcast, but what I like so much about your journey is that, you weren't a researcher, you weren't an academic per se, you weren't a writer. I mean, you were a writer, but not by income, so to speak.
Right,
and now
not professionally.
And not professionally, now you are. Was there a pivot point where you really kind of gained the courage or went all in, or was there a quote from Adam Grant, like you just said? Was there like a tipping point where you said, I'm gonna go all in? Or was it less sort of celebrated and it was just like the 3-year slog and the 5 o'clock in the morning? Because not everything has to have some grand moment where you had an epiphany in the morning. At what point did you realize, I am a writer professionally? This is my income, this is my contribution.
It's funny because I wish I could give you an inspirational, I had a moment, I was, out in nature and I just realized this is what I'm meant to be doing. No, not at all. I was laid off. I was laid off from Comedy Central, very laid off. I had a complete identity crisis. Like, who am I without this job? I've had this job 12 years. My first book, Buy Yourself the Effing Lilies, had come out. It came out just as I was laid off. It did phenomenally well. Like, I don't even understand how it did so well, but it caught on like wildfire. I was professionally an author simply because Comedy Central had taken away my other professional identity. And it took me 2 years to be okay with that. So even though the book was making money, I'm on Good Morning America, I'm doing all the quote unquote things, right, that tell you that you're successful. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, you need to go get a job. What are you doing? You need a boss, you need a schedule, you need a title, you need constantly. So there really was no glorious moment where I grabbed my own agency and made this career shift. The shift happened around me, despite me. And I'd say the only turning point was about 2.5 years in. I just realized how much I loved my life and how much I loved what I was doing, that connecting with readers. I teach workshops and I speak a lot about what we can do to take care of ourselves, particularly at work. How can we better serve our mental health? What are the practical tools? I realized, wow, I'm contributing. I wish I had been sitting here in this audience. I really could have used these tools. I could have used somebody giving me a hand. And now I got to be that somebody. And so that was when I just sort of let things be as they were. Like, I was successful at writing. I could just let go and not resist it anymore. So if anyone who's listening, they feel like they need this big moment, not necessarily. And I really was desperately clinging to my corporate identity for a very long time.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think there's a lot of people listening right now that are experiencing some part of that journey. They're in the front end or that right at that kind of culmination point. I mean, how dare them lay you off, unlike all those other disloyal people that didn't stay, right, for 12 years. But I appreciate you sharing the journey because I know everyone can relate to some portion of that, maybe if not consciously, unconsciously. Your book is riotous. It's called Glow in the Effing Dark. I've cleaned that up for the family listeners. And it's an interesting kind of book because you have 3 sections and you don't have chapter 1 or chapter 7, although they're kind of chapters. You don't call them chapters. They're more sort of thoughts and entries, and they build on each other. By far, my favorite is called The Scarlet Letter. The tagline here is find what's under your anxiety. And I'd love to read a passage. One out of every 100 episodes, I'll read a passage. But this is riotous while also being very insightful and sort of giving voice and naming things for other people. You talk about kind of your typical morning, and you talk about how you wake up and you've been in a sheer panic because everyone's gonna find out you're a fraud and no one's gonna buy your books and you're gonna miss your deadlines, everyone's gonna hate you and no one's gonna like you, and then you brush your teeth. And then you talk about how you go and buy an oat milk latte and you stand in line and realize you shouldn't spend $7 and you leave and realize, wait, I needed that after all. And then you talk about how you go to lunch with a friend and all during lunch you realize, is this person my friend? Do I really like them? Why have I picked them? Do they like me? Do I really like them? And you go into this strong sort of spiral about all of that and how you probably you need to go meet new people ASAP so that you can fast track them into intimacy. I love your writing. You kind of write what so many people are feeling, and that takes courage. That takes a lot of courage. In a moment, I'm gonna have you riff on anxiety. You're not a clinician, you're not a psychiatrist, last time I checked, but you have an intimate seat with anxiety. First, how do you deal with the haters? I imagine you had your fair share of vitriol on social media and people who don't like what you write or feel like you're too casual or whatever the term is. How you've put yourself out there. And I think that is enormously courageous and can be viewed by some as being responsible or irresponsible. How do you deal with the vitriol or the hate or the pushback you no doubt have gotten over 2 very socially forward, should we say, books?
You know, I hate to disappoint, but I really haven't gotten any pushback. Now, fingers crossed, I don't want to jinx anything, but I think the reason that I haven't gotten that kind of vitriol is I'm just talking about my experience. This is how I feel. This is what I went through. You know, what we haven't discussed is that these books, they're coming from, I grew up in a neglected, abusive household and had to become my own parent, right? So my background is not, I had a white picket fence childhood and a bunch of money and then I became an executive, rah. It's like, no, I had a really miserable start to life and decided to take full responsibility for my life. That even if how I was treated was not my fault and I was not to blame, it was now my responsibility. And that if I let these wounds go unchecked, they would just get infected and ruin the rest of my life. And so the biggest message behind my books is that you have inherent self-worth, each and every one of us, regardless of our job title. And we know this intellectually. We know this, I'm a valuable, worthy person. We don't know it in our hearts. We don't know it in our bodies. If we did, we wouldn't make half the weird, like desperate decisions that we do to quote unquote get ahead, whatever that means, right? And by the way, I really wanted to get ahead my whole career, and I would still say that I'm very ambitious. So I hold all these truths at the same time. And I think I was saying it's self-worth on the one hand, and then it's agency, that you have more power than you think to change your circumstances. The problem becomes when you get convinced that you can't change your own circumstances. It's called learned helplessness. Then you make that true. You think, I can't change this. I can't change what job I'm at. I'm trapped in this thing, you know, whatever it is you're believing about yourself. And then you start to make it true. And so by not acting, right? And so I think part of the reason why I haven't really gotten much pushback is because who is going to find fault with everyone's valuable? You have more power than you think. Here's my story of how I turned an abusive childhood into something else, into a book that's supposed to help other people. I'd also say I have a very good case of pronoia, which, you know, people are paranoid, people don't like me. You know, in that passage, anxiety, yes, sometimes I do worry about that. But mostly I just assume everybody kind of likes me. nobody's really thinking about me when I'm not talking to them, because that's how I feel about everybody. Like I just, in the pre kind of getting ready for this podcast episode, when you were like, you made a joke, what's your address? I'm just like, here it is. I trust you. And for better or for worse, that's how I treat everybody. And I kind of think that's how I'll be treated. And it actually has been kind of amazing because things just don't stick to me, really. I'm pretty easily able to let them go. So I hope this doesn't unleash a torrent of haters.
Well, I think
Please, God.
I think my gift to you is all the haters are kicking my ass on Reddit, Glassdoor, and YouTube. They don't have time to kick yours. So it's my gift to you, my friend. It's my gift.
Thank you.
Let's talk about anxiety. You were very vulnerable and very transparent about your journey, the medications you've had. You call it the ABCs of medicine. I can't even pronounce them all. You list them out. There's some that you forgot. You talk about your therapy. I really would like to spend most of our conversation today talking about anxiety. And I'm going to set it up for a second here. I don't know, and I don't care whether or not, I have clinical anxiety, or I have mild anxiety, or I just have human anxiety, right? All of us have some level of anxiousness or anxiety, and all of us have some word for it, or some prescription for it, or some way to overcome it, or ignore it, or deny it, whatever it is. I know you are not a clinician, but I would love to have you just sort of meander around what you have learned about anxiety, anxious thoughts, tendencies, ways in which you manage them, don't manage them. I bet a lot of people come to you on social media or at conferences or events and ask you about questions about it. I'd let's just have you riff and take it wherever you'd want to go in the hopes that you can help some people like me better understand, no, you're just living life. No, you're just a parent. Yeah. No, your house burned down, or no, you're manufacturing this. Just give us some time on this topic.
Yeah, I would say anxiety is something that people come to me pretty constantly about. We're living in very anxious times. So the first thing I would say is, yeah, we have a lot of reasons to be anxious. There are so many different threats in our environment, and I would say there always have been. From the beginning of mankind, there are things to be anxious about. Though I am not a clinician, I am a really good student, and I've had some really good teachers. And though the book, they're all stories, they're supposed to be funny, it's heavily researched. So this chapter in particular, I had Dr. Ellen Vora, who wrote The Anatomy of Anxiety. I had her go through it because I don't want to be irresponsible, right? Like I want to make sure I'm giving good information, even though I'm not a doctor. And a lot of what Ellen Vora talks about is there are real things to be anxious about, and you don't need to blame yourself for feeling anxious about things that any human would feel anxious about. So I want to hold that one thing. There are things to be anxious about. That's okay. The problem becomes when we start to judge that we are anxious. Oh, I'm anxious. That's such a bad thing. We reject parts of ourselves that are actually working on our own behalf. Why are we anxious? Because there's a part of us that wants to protect us. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. There's a part of you inside that wants to protect you, that's worried. That is to be embraced. The issue when we reject it, I don't want to be anxious. Rejection feels really, really bad. Self-acceptance feels good. Self-rejection, really, really bad. So that's the first thing, is just anxiety is okay. We don't need to treat it like it's the worst thing that ever happened. That said, it can feel really, really bad, right? And so I've dealt with anxiety my whole life. I take medication for it, all those things. I have lots of coping mechanisms for anxiety. And what I've realized is that oftentimes my anxiety is not really anxiety. It's the feeling of pushing another feeling down. So in my book, I give an emotion wheel, because at a certain point in my life, the only emotions I thought I could feel were good, bad, sad, tired, busy. And busy is not an emotion. At least I don't think it is. I had no access to my emotions. I didn't even know what the vocabulary for emotions might be. I didn't know how to express my emotions. I certainly didn't know how to take care of my emotions when they came up. And I use the example in the book of having a boyfriend who was constantly lying to me and me feeling very anxious. And I went to my psychiatrist. I'm so anxious about this. And she looked at me and she said, I don't think you're anxious. I think you're furious. And it was like a bomb detonated in my brain. Oh my God, that's right. I'm furious. I'm furious, but I don't know how to be mad. I don't know how to express anger. I don't know what to do with that emotion. So what I do is I push it way, way, way down to the bottom of my soul in the hopes that it will go away. And that pushing down, resisting how I feel, that's what I'm perceiving as anxiety. But if I can learn how to express my anger, the anxiety feeling goes away. And so, what a clinician would say, we have primary emotions. There are 5 of them, 5 or 6, and then we have secondary emotions. And usually anxiety or depression, 2 things that I deal with, in fact, take pills for. Like, I'm not denying that they exist in any kind of way. They do, they're real. But oftentimes anxiety and depression are attempts to cope with other emotions. And if you can get to the primary emotion and feel the primary emotion and heal the primary emotion, the anxiety goes away. And so without being the most annoying person who ever lived, which maybe I am, I really don't feel anxiety anymore. I feel fear when there's something to fear. I feel anger when I'm angry about something. I feel the primary feelings. And when I start to notice, oh, this has the flavor of what used to be anxiety for me, I literally get out my emotion wheel and ask, what is under this? And if I could go on one more second without taking 17 minutes, this isn't a story, it's just a little truism that I have found. It is very powerful to have a diagnosis like anxiety or depression because a lot of us are very lost and we don't know what to do. When I was told I had clinical anxiety, it was like a hallelujah, amen, because, oh, that's a problem. Okay, we can fix a problem, right? The a new problem becomes when we start to see ourselves as our diagnosis. So I am an anxious person. That statement, now again, there are people who really suffer from anxiety. Let's take that population out of this, right? Want to respect that. But for most of us, are we really anxious people through and through 100%? Or do we sometimes experience anxiety? Once in a while, maybe even once a day, you experience anxiety. That isn't your whole life. And when we start to say things like, I am anxious, it takes away, like, you've definitely heard this. I was just born an anxious person. Really? Like through and through, you're just an anxious person? Or are you a human who sometimes feels anxiety and the anxiety can be dealt with? So diagnoses are very helpful, right? They lead us in the right direction. And then they can be very harmful because they limit what we are capable of.
Tara, in your experience and in your research and surrounding yourself with experts and writing this book, is there like a litmus test or kind of just a series of questions that you could ask yourself to say, hey, I'm just feeling some anxiety because tensions are high, the budget's tight, my kids are kicking my you-know-what, or no, I am anxious and it's a problem that I need some outside help with? Do you have like a gate system or anything to say, no, here's some questions to ask yourself, and if you're answering them this way, you might need some help, versus you might just need a new routine or a walk or sunshine or a vacation or a break or boundaries?
Yeah, I would say that if anxiety is really getting in the way of how you live, how you're living. So the story I have in the book, I couldn't really function. I was waking up in a full body panic. I was living in an anxiety attack, or so I thought, an anxiety attack. So I went and got help. So I would say it doesn't need to be as bad as it was for me, but if it really is getting in the way of your life, it is make an appointment. It really, as somebody who's had a lot of psychiatrists, a lot of therapists, it's really not that big of a deal. I chose one that accepted my insurance's copay. it's not a big deal to ask for help. I know it can be hard to get to that point, but once you do it, I promise it doesn't kill you. It makes you much stronger. So anyone, I think you could go ask for help, and they will help you see, like, is this really anxiety? Like, is this a bigger deal? Is there something you can change with your habits? So if you feel like you need an extra pair of hands, then you definitely need an extra pair of hands. On the other hand, if it's manageable, if you're feeling anxious, but it's not like overrunning your life, something like an emotion wheel, like I have in Glow in the Effing Dark, and asking yourself, what am I feeling? And getting very surgical at really being able to label, this is what I'm feeling. It is extremely helpful. And once you see what you're feeling, you can start to say, oh, I'm afraid about, I'm trying to use a real example. I had a TV show. I woke up every morning at 4 a.m., panicked about it. I had found the TV show. I was responsible for a multi-million-dollar budget, like waking up and all this anxiety. Looking at an emotion wheel, what I realized is I, was nervous because I had put myself out there. I was afraid because the talent actually, I didn't think was as talented as I had previously thought. I was able just to write out, oh, this is what I'm feeling. And that gives a sense of relief. There's actually a lot of science behind this. It's called affect labeling. I say it's the emotion wheel. If you want to look it up, Google it. It's affect labeling. There's a lot of science behind when you simply write down how you feel, you almost instantly feel a sense of relief. Many of us will almost instantly feel a sense of relief and have a better idea about what to do with our feelings.
You are a riotously funny writer. I mean, I find myself laughing out loud. I'll tell you, I'm a literary agent in my day job, and people ask me all the time how to get a best-selling book. And I say, well, you don't need $500,000. That helps. Write a great book. And then have a lot of people fall in love with it, because I've texted 8 people in the last 24 hours saying, oh, you should buy this book. You're going to love this. And this is how these books do really well. How much of your time at Comedy Central did that maybe instruct your writing style? Are you a naturally funny person? Did you learn this? Did you mature into it? Because you're a riotously funny writer.
Thank you. I wish I was being a little funnier off the cuff right now. Yeah, you'll have to take your word for it that I am funny in the book. I always loved humor. In high school, I was voted most likely to be on SNL. Those kinds of things. So I was always drawn towards humor and comedy. I think because my life was so bleak. The beginning 20 years of my life were miserable, a miserable slog. And I think if I hadn't been able to laugh at some of the things and use a little gallows humor, I would have just been crying the whole time. So I think out of a lot of pain came that comedy. But now I just love it as an art form. It's so cool. Laughter is so weird. The fact that you can get a body to make that sound, that's mystical. And like, wait, why? So now I just really like it as an art form. And for me, where my work is to give people practical self-care tools to remind them of their worth and their agency, humor is a way better way to do that than me just like giving people vegetables. I gave you a kind of vegetable-y answer to anxiety, but that whole chapter is about my con man boyfriend and like the various schemes he was like trying to run on me. He's like a multi-millionaire, but I need to Venmo him $1,200 to tow his car in Bakersfield, California. I like telling funny stories to get at these more serious topics because people relate more to that and they can access it more if it all isn't just the heaviest thing you've ever heard in your life.
Which is clearly your formula for writing best-selling books. I mean, the number of awards your book has been nominated for and achieved is just like a long list. I won't even read it. They speak for themselves. I'll tell you, I think what I learned most about reading this recent book was being a little kinder to myself, being a little more forgiving of how I punish myself or how I brood on something that I let someone down or didn't do something the way I should. That's something that's a gift you gave me, is being a little, not irresponsibly forgiving of myself, like excusing everything away, because I can rationalize most things, which is a different podcast and book and diagnosis. But you did give me the gift of whatever, life goes on, I'll figure it out. And so I appreciate that. Okay, 2 down, some to go. You have written 2 phenomenally well-selling, award-winning books for your many, many, many followers and admirers. What's next for you?
I'm writing my own journal. So I am a big proponent of journaling. I've been journaling for 15 years. If I'm an expert in anything, it's definitely journaling. So I'm actually coming out with my own journal, which will hopefully come out in 2025 through my publisher. But other than that, I'm really building a business out of this. I see that there's such a need for people to know they're okay, to help themselves, to be a little kinder to themselves. And if you zoom out, self-care, when done authentically, is always community care. We forget we make up the community. So if we're not well, I really mean this like very emphatically. This isn't just some like nice thought. If we're not well, we infect everyone around us. So if you want to do something really good for the rest of the world today, not in 5 years when you have more money, not when you retire, but today, you would start taking care of yourself. You would start being a little kinder to yourself. You know, Scott, like you were just saying, I'm so glad that you're being a little kinder to yourself. The science backs up that when we are kinder to ourselves, and particularly when we have compassion for ourselves, we achieve more. We're more ambitious. We're more likely to get what we want. It is not true that punishing yourself is the best option to quote unquote get ahead, right? So it's not even the most productive way to work. I tried it. Trust me, if hating yourself got you results, I would be like the queen of the world. It wasn't until I let go a little bit and started to be kinder to myself that I was able to, you know, have these books do as well as they've done, build a business that's basically, it's coaching and community and really trying to make a difference at a local level. You know, let's start with ourselves. So that's what's next. Reminding the whole world of their self-worth and their agency to change.
Including using
no big deal.
Including using your journal to do that. I'll tell you, I think you've given all of us a gift today, including me, because I will admit I'm a lot of things. I'm petty, I'm jealous, I'm insecure. I think that's called being human. But I'm also a bit of a victim and a martyr sometimes. You know, I'm a dad for 3 sons and a husband and an entrepreneur and a lot of things for a lot of people. And so I don't practice much self-care. Oh, I don't have time to go do that. Well, I can't possibly afford that. Well, I can't find that time. I don't have that luxury. And I'll tell you, it's impacted my marriage because I have, in a moment of vulnerability, told you, I tell my wife, I said, I think you play before you work. I think you need to work before you play. When I say play, my meaning on the Peloton. And my wife would say, no, I need this to survive these 3 boys kicking my ass for the next 12 hours today. And so I think one of the lessons I have learned from your book and from the discussion today is I can't be a great provider and a great husband and a great father and a great friend and a great business partner and a leader if I'm not taking care of myself, including, you know, exercising and being a little more forgiving and investing in myself and taking time, because I see that as being selfish, and maybe I thrive on the martyr role a little bit, and maybe I thrive on being seen as the victim family. Oh, I'm last in line. I know people can relate to that if they're honest and they're self-aware. And so I appreciate your coaching me today. This has been an enormously valuable interview. Tara Schuster, you are the best-selling author of numerous books, including Buy Yourself the Effing Lilies, clean that up, and most recently, Glow in the Effing Dark, Simple Practices to Heal Your Soul from someone who learned the hard way. Looking forward to your journal coming out and people flocking to your site. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your vulnerability, your transparency, your courage, modeling healthy practices and writing about it in a way that people can both A, learn from, and C, B, laugh out loud, and C, like me, text their friends and say, oh my gosh, you've got to read this book because this is gonna help you. You've done a great job. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And we'll see you back here next week for a new conversation on leadership.